Okay, thank you, Henry. Okay, well, hello, everyone, all over the US and Central and South America. Good to be here again. This is part three out of a five-part series dealing with the essays and proofs of the stamps of Guatemala. There'll be two more sessions following this. So let's begin. We left off around 1918, and today we're going to take the years from 1918 to about 1943. The interesting thing about collecting in this area is that there are always new discoveries. I'm always surprised when I see something that I've never seen before. And most of the essays and proofs, a lot of them are unique. So each one is truly a discovery. Let's go now to 1919. And as most of you know, the Waterloo Company had already issued many stamps. And these are supplemental in the series. In the normal stamps, what makes it interesting is that there were early and late printings. And all of the vignettes in these stamps are in black. But there are two kinds of black. There's an oily black for the early printings, and there's kind of a matte, flat gray for the later printings. And you can see it fairly clearly in some of these illustrations. Like many of the Waterloo stamps, there were what we call salesman samples. These are special printings made by Waterloo that the salesmen used. They had salesmen around the world who tried to sell Waterloo's printing capabilities. So in many cases, these stamps were printed in different colors from the issued stamps. Some were imperforate, some were perforate, and they were given numbers, ST numbers, and they were stored in the archives in envelopes. And on the outside of the envelope, they would paste an example of these specimens, and they would number them by hand. So what you see here that are numbered are cutouts from those envelopes. Each of the stamps, well, most of them had a punch in them. And also they were overprinted Waterloo and Sons Limited and the word specimen. And as we discussed earlier, they come with different angles in the overprints and with different types of fonts. Fonts with serifs and fonts without serifs. And they were printed in black, blue, and red. And here are some examples. They were also printed in small sheetlets of 9, 3 by 3. So these are actually priced in some of the catalogs. They're only slightly rare. They are available on the market. One of the interesting things about these stamps, if you look on top, you'll see the 3 issued stamps. But what they would do with some of these specimens is they would, of course, change the colors. We know that. But what they also did was they changed the printing method. In the case of the 1.5 peso, both examples are engraved, the one on top and the one on the lower left. But on the bottom, they used a different printing process for printing the vignette. Instead of being engraved, it's lithographed. You can see it's a fuzzier kind of printing. I enlarged the engraved and the lithographed so you can get an idea of how flat the lithographed is. Also, on the lithographed small sheets, those sheets of 9, they have gutters between some of the stamps. And you can see the angles vary. One of the more unusual things is to find a perforated proof of a postcard. So Waterloo issued this postcard, 50 centavo postcard, showing a railroad bridge. And on the right, you see a proof. Now, the postcard itself is lithographed, but the proof is actually engraved. And you can see the rows of perforations here. It seems to be an exact copy. The salesman's sample seems to be an exact copy of the issued postcard. This is the only time you find this in Guatemala. Here's something that I really enjoy. This is a hand-drawn essay meant to celebrate the Federation of Central America, which didn't really come to be. The American Banknote Company prepared essays for these commemorative issues, and they prepared two essays. The one that you see was for a new postage stamp, and the one I will show you is for a new postcard, where the design would occupy the entire side of the card. These proofs, these essays rather, are labeled A and B. This one is inscribed Estado de Guatemala, Estados Unidos de Central America, 1821 to 1921. And there's a lot of handwritten information. I didn't include the details in this presentation, but it talks about the size. It shows you kind of phantom perforations. It tells you how large the stamps were supposed to be and so forth, and also shows you some approvals. This is quite large. This is, tall, very tall essay. Quite beautiful, the work that went into this. And the mountains, see the triangle with the 5 mountains, that was supposed to represent the Central American countries that intended to join the Federation. Here we see sample B. This was supposed to occupy a postcard. And again, you see 5 stars instead of 5 mountains, 5 stars for the 5 countries. There's an outline map showing El Salvador. Now, I'm not sure why they showed El Salvador, because there was no intention to join the Federation. On these, they stated that the quantity to be printed was 300,000, and the production process was to have been lithography in the color green. So these essays do give you a lot of information, and they're really pieces of art. Sometimes I think they're more art than they are philately. Again, so in 1922, Waterloo decides they need a 12.5 cent and a 25 cent issue. And here we see the die proof of the 12.5 cent. And again, we have these salesman's copies, but here's what's really interesting. See the one on the upper left, the one that's in brown. Compare that to the ones next to it that are in a vermilion color. The one on the left in brown is engraved, but the ones to the right are lithographed, both perforate and imperforate. And below it, you see the 25 centavo in a different color. Remember, the color before was supposed to be brown. Here we see it in red. These salesman samples were issued in some strange configurations. The 12.5 centavo on top is a little strange because, first, it doesn't follow the 3x3 normal sheetlet configuration. And notice the gutters, both horizontally and vertically, between the stamps. In 1924, the Guatemala government decided to have Perkins-Bacon issue the same stamps, really, that Waterloo had issued, with some exceptions. The 15 centavo first appears printed by Perkins-Bacon. There are quite a number of color trial die proofs. These are proofs that simply vary in color for the most part. So you see the top row are all die proofs of the 25 centavo value, all engraved, same die, but just different trial colors. In the row below, we see a partial die proof of the 50 centavo in the color lake. And now we see a few color variations, crimson lake and lake. And on the right, you see a partial die proof of the 1 peso value with only the scroll work showing. Again, more color trial die proofs. That 1 peso, before we saw just the frame, now we see the complete design in 3 different colors. And we see a sunken die proof of the 3 peso. There were also plate proofs of the Perkins-Bacon stamps. And here we see some of them. A 1 centavo in yellow brown, that's the issued color, 1 peso in slate black, 2.5 peso in purple. Okay, so in 1926, Waterloo comes up with a new set of stamps. And I'm sure you're mostly familiar with these. The one thing I'd like you to notice, if you go back, notice that Perkins-Bacon's came up with a 15 peso value in the lower right. If you look at the imprint very closely, it says Perkins, Bacon and Co. Limited, Londres, London. If you now go to the Waterloo stamps, that 15 pesos is now being printed by Waterloo. And if you look at the imprint, it says Waterloo and Sons Limited, Londres. The interesting thing here is that both of these stamps, the 2 versions of the 15 peso, were overprinted to make them airmail stamps. But the Perkins-Bacon version is much more scarce than the Waterloo. Here again, we see the same pattern emerge, a plate proof of Waterloo's 1 peso, and salesman samples of Waterloo's other stamps. Now, we don't see salesman samples of Perkins-Bacon at all. We only see Waterloo. So now we have Waterloo, we have Perkins-Bacon, Waterloo, and now the contract is moved to De La Rue Company in London, Thomas De La Rue and Company in London. So here we see the same grouping of stamps, some different designs in here and some repeat designs as well. So it gets interesting here. We now start to get into some of the different die proofs, and we see some changes and retouching. I'd like to focus your attention on the nose. This is the De La Rue, I believe. Look closely at the nose, and we're going to see how it changes a little bit. In the lower left, we have the 2 centavo dark green, the vignette only, and we see the details of the nose, and we see that they're somewhat different. On the right, the nose has been touched up. If you look at that plate proof of the 2 centavos green, the complete plate proof, it says touched. Can everyone see that? I hope you can. It says touched. But there's a pencil sketch next to it that shows just the nose and how are they going to touch up the nose. Now, I've noticed a lot of die proofs are listed in the references, particularly in Guatemala 2, G2, but very few have actually been seen. I only have a few of them. I expect to see more, but not so much. Again, these are from De La Rue and Company. Waterloo, more common, and so forth. Now, here's an interesting essay. This is the only time I've seen this essay. This is from 1930. It's a volcano essay. We don't know who printed this. We don't know the designer. It's unrecorded as far as I can tell. They're both in 1 centavo values, but in the one on the right, Guatemala is spelled wrong. If you look at the left, Guatemala is spelled Guatemala. But on the right, it's Guatemala. They left out the E in Guatemala. So we don't know what happened to this design, at least I don't know. Both designs are a little bit different. They're obviously done with pen and ink on lined paper, but if anyone has information about this, I would love to know more. So in 1930, to celebrate the Ferrocarril Railway, the Ferrocarril de los Altos. Guatemala issued three rather interesting stamps. They're quite common. Sometimes they're available imperforate vertically with displaced vignettes. But these essays came into my possession. They're a little hard to track down. They're unrecorded. I haven't seen any information about them or their purpose. They're valued at 6.25 centavos and 12 centavos, which is kind of strange because at the time, what we really see are 6 centavos and 12.5 centavos. We believe that these may be essays for that ferrocarril issue. That is why I put them on this page. The one on the left, the 6.25 centavo, says FC Interoceanico, which FC means ferrocarril. And there's a vignette that bears the portrait of President Barrios. President Barrios had a major role in promoting these railroads. The 12 centavos value seems to show the railway lines. It's hand-drawn, they're both hand-drawn on cardstock. And the 6.25 centavo essay has ruled lines on the back. Again, if anyone knows anything about these, let me know. Here's another essay that's kind of contemporary, and it might be part of the same essay series as the previous slide. But if you look at the face of it, it seems to commemorate a constitution of 1898 in February. But as far as I can tell, there was no constitution in 1898. The incoming president was Manuel Estrada Cabrera, who built the ferrocarril. And he had a constitutional amendment in 1898 to allow him to continue in office as dictator until 1920. So maybe this celebrates his constitutional amendment to we're not sure. Here's something that a lot of people are familiar with. Guatemala decided to issue airmail stamp in 1930. And they printed this fairly common stamp by lithography. The printer was Byron Zadig and Company of Guatemala. The designer of the stamp was Alfredo Galvez Suarez, but other designers created essays, not just Suarez. So there was a man named Galguera, Jose Galguera. He was a Cuban artist living in Guatemala. And he submitted two different designs. Here are examples of these essays. The essays are available in other colors, but I did not put them in this slide. But each one, the 2 centavo and the 5 centavo, come in a variety of colors. The 2 centavo is a plane over the hills of Central America with Mayan monoliths on each side, imperf, no gum. And the 5 centavo, again, shows a map over Central America, imperf, no gum. So on the Suarez essay, they submitted a 15 centavo value in 7 colors. Now let's go back to the issued stamp. In the upper right, the issued stamp is 6 centavos in red. But look at the essays. The essays are all 15 centavos, imperf, in at least 7 different colors with gum. The pair of 15 centavos below is none of the colors of the other essays. It's not like the 2 blues. The upper right-hand corner seems to be ultramarine, and maybe the lower left blue, maybe it's indigo blue. This is a different shade. I don't know why it's perforated. Why would they perforate these essays? Maybe to show the Guatemala government what they would look like perforated. Suarez issued another set of essays that did not come to issue. They were all valued 30 centavos. They showed the head of a pilot with wings. Again, they were imperforate with gum. Here's a very common stamp, the coffee propaganda stamp of 1932. It was a recess engraved by the American Banknote Company. We don't know who designed it. It's a Mayan monolith. And here below it, you see the die proof, sunken die proof with a plate number. We've already had quite a bit of discussion about how the American Banknote Company, how they renumbered and why. I won't go into it again. In 1939, there was an issue, the day of the race issue. And you see the 5 values that came to issue: half centavo, 1, 2, 3, 5. There were essays produced for these stamps, and they vary, the design varies a little bit from the issued stamps. If you look closely at the issued stamps, below the 3 crosses, you see the years 1492 to 1933. On the essays, that does not exist. Also, the value, all the essays seem to be valued at 64 centavos. I don't know why they chose 64. But they were also issued in a rather unusual format. They were issued in vertical strips of 10. Now, a single sheet of the 3 centavos rose plate proof was discovered. This is a photo taken in November 1987 that shows the sheet mostly intact. Obviously, one stamp has been cut out of the sheet, but you can see the interesting arrangement of this, and some of the guidelines still show. Here are this photograph, the big photograph, really doesn't show the color accurately. Here we have a few of the stamps that I believe were cut from this sheet. In other words, this sheet no longer exists. But if you look at the lower left-hand corner, you'll see that this cutout probably came from that sheet. If you look closely at the guidelines, I'm pretty sure that's where it came from. I'm not exactly sure the 2 stamps to the right, the line pair, I'm not sure where they were cut from, but they were almost certainly cut from the right-hand strip of 10. There was supposed to be a Central American conference in 1934, and it was convoked by Guatemala. And although an agreement was reached in principle by the participants, they never signed a final treaty to unite Central America, and the conference was deemed to be a failure. So the stamps never issued, unfortunately. But the essays were issued in a variety of colors, some of which are only subtly different from each other. What we do have are some photographic essays of those stamps. These are printed in black and white, or I should say just black, really, black on transparencies. The upper pair, you can see the 4 centavos. You can see the essay of the 5 centavos. These are on transparencies, clear plastic. When we look for essays and proofs from 1935 to 1942, we basically don't see any. There's this space of years, and we don't see any essays and proofs. If we look at the issues of those years, we have this following list: the 1935 Barrios commemorative, the definitive air mails of 1935, and so on. We just don't see essays or proofs, but these stamps do have something in common. They were all printed by the Johan and Shed and Sons Company of Haarlem in the Netherlands. So maybe their quality control was so good that no essays or proofs ever escaped. And some of these were also photogravure, so we don't see much of the preparatory work there. Many of these designs were designed by Carlos Marquardt and Prudencio de Villa. the flow of stamps from Anshed and Company stopped with the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands in 1945. Oh, I'm sorry, 1940, I should say, 41, 42. So when we start to see essays again in this period, some of these essays are rather interesting. Guatemala needed 5 centavo stamps. You know, Guatemala was always running out of postage stamps. That's why you see so many overprints. So they decided to overprint this 50 centavo stamp, overprinted to reduce the value, and they actually printed it 3 different ways. At first, they overprinted it with a 0.8 millimeter bar. And they figured out after a while that the bar just didn't cover the value very well. So they went to the first bar was too thin, the second bar was too thick, and the third bar, I'm sorry, I'm getting this a little wrong. The first bar was 0.8 millimeters. There was an intermediate bar that was 1.2, finally 2 millimeters. So they issued a lot of stamps with 0.8, just a few with 1.2, and then a lot with 2 millimeters. But they issued essays for these. And here you can see these essays are printed on a brownish, almost toilet tissue, very thin tissue. And again, I've only seen the ones I have. I don't know if there are others like them. So in 1942, the American Banknote Company issued these definitive stamps. And here you can see the sunken die proofs of 2 of them. And they also issued them all in green on India paper. And again, we see the typical numbering of the American Banknote Company. In 1942, they needed a new postal tax stamp. You may remember that for many years, Guatemala required a 1 centavo postal tax on all mail, domestic and foreign. So they decided to print a little larger one than usual. And they printed many varieties of this stamp. They printed it with imprint, without imprint, different papers, different perforation varieties. It could be a whole study in itself. Well, here we see partial die proofs. We see partial die proofs of the center of the stamp showing part of the palace. And here we see a complete die proof as well. And here we see a complete die proof in deep blue on regular paper with imprint. Every year, the Postmaster General of Guatemala sent out greeting cards to the officials within the postal system. And they would take a design that was in common use. It would announce that the Director of General Posts and Telecommunications are pleased to wish you and your personnel and your administration a happy and prosperous new year. This one is dated 1948, the 1st of January. And these are actually hard to find, not because there were not many issued. There were many issued, but because collectors cut out the stamp to make it look like these were essays or proofs. They're not. It's just part of a greeting card. In 1943, Guatemala issued this regular postage stamp. It was printed by their new Guatemalan printers, Teller de Grabados, and these were designed by Celeste de Espada. And the engraver was Frederick Odin and Francisco Gutierrez. There's no imprint. In the G2 catalog, they mention a photographic essay that exists in sepia that was reduced to stamp size of the original design. This, what you're seeing here, must be the one they referenced in the G2 book. As far as I know, it's unique. It's the only one in existence. And there are some differences between this essay and the stamp. You may notice that the stamp has no imprint. The essay does. And that is one difference of many. Here's a plate proof of the same design. And here's an imperforate block of 9 in the issued color. As always, we have to scratch our head and ask ourselves this question. This imperforate group of stamps, is it simply an imperforate group or is it a plate proof? And sometimes it's very hard to tell the difference. Some of you may be familiar with the Antigua commemorative airmail of 1943. What makes this unusual is that this was issued in 2 versions. In the first version, the lines of shading in the tablet are heavier. They redrew it later for lighter shading lines. Here we see both of these proofs are of the type 2 with the lighter shading lines. The die proof is in type 2. It's a typical die proof. The plate proof on the right is a little bit unusual in the paper it's printed on. Normally it'd be printed on white paper, similar to the stamp itself. This is printed on a brownish, rough paper. And that is the end of the presentation. This takes us through 1943. And next time we'll pick up from this year and we will move forward. So on that note, I'm going to turn it back to Henry so Henry can direct the Q&A session. Take it up, Henry.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate the presentation, always interesting. If someone has some questions for Mike, if you can raise your hand virtually. And while we wait, I have a couple of questions, Michael. One of them is more like a technique, but you have shown some that are engraved and then there is a lithograph. Is there an easy process being followed to make a lithograph transfer out of a engraved die? Because the details are exactly the same.
Yeah, there is a process. I don't know what that process is. I don't know how you go from engraved plate to lithograph stone.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a process.
Okay. And the second question before we go to this raise hand, in many countries in Latin America, we have this sequence during the 30s, the sequence of printers, Waterloo, Perkins, or Perkins and Waterloo, and then you have De La Rue. They are all British. What happened? Were they competing to one another? They agreed, okay, let's target this market. Is there any story behind that? Or because you can pretty much follow the same sequence in many of the countries?
That's interesting. I wonder, I don't know what the internal negotiations are like. I think most of the time, from what I've read, it always came down to price negotiation.
Right.
But I think I suspect that some of the time it had to do with personal connections.
Oh, yes.
And maybe some kickback, some graft.
Some extra motivation.
But I think other members here might have some other information as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I wasn't aware until your comments that this was the pretty uniform practice.
American Bank is somewhere in between, but in the 30s to the, I would say, 50s, at least you have Waterloo and De La Rue pretty much everywhere.
Right.
That's what it is. Okay, Ernesto, you have a question there.
¿Me ayudas, Henry?
Sí, claro.
Antes que nada, felicitar a Michael. Y creo que al inicio de la plática comentaba que por qué había uno de 6 centavos y un cuarto. No sé si tenga algo que ver la respuesta que voy a dar. En unos poquitos años atrás, el cambio de reales a centavos. Entonces, 8 reales equivalía a un peso, 4 reales 50 centavos, 2 reales 25, un real 12.5. y el medio real es 6.25 o 6 un cuarto.
Okay.
No sé si tenga algo que ver
Okay.
la muestra que me mostró, pues.
Sure.
Nada más ese comentario y felicitarlo.
Okay. I'm gonna attempt the translation. So first, congratulations to you for the presentation. That's what Ernesto was conveying. And his question goes with the 6 1/4 stamp you show. So he had some information related to some currency change. I don't remember the fractions he mentioned, but in that breakdown of the currency, there is one that went from different fractions up to 12 1/2. And then the next fraction documented is 6 1/4. ¿De qué año es eso, Ernesto?
En México es 1868, cuando fue el cambio de reales a decimales.
Ok, 1868, ¿no?
La muestra que él presentó era 1880 o 90, algo así. Entonces,
Ok, 20 años después. The fractions Ernesto is alluding to is from 1868 and is from Mexico. And I guess the 6 1/2 you mentioned is 20 years later, right?
More than that. I know what you're referring to. The conversion from real to peso and centavo created some pretty strange fractions. Yes, but that was wow, 1870s, I think. But yes. 1870s, I think.
Yes, yes. Okay, so no correlation whatsoever.
Un comentario, la muestra que está presentando Michael es de 1918 al 40 y algo.
43,
entonces,
sí.
Ajá, entonces no es de la época esta, entonces es como que iba fuera de época el 6 1/4.
Sí, okay. Yeah, Carlos also confirmed that we are talking about two different periods.
Well, first, I would like to say thank you to Ernesto. Ernesto, I really appreciate your question. And Henry, thank you for translating.
Sure.
And Carlos, thank you for confirming what we thought.
Great. Alfonso also has a question.
Michael, thank you so much for the presentation. May I see the postal card from the 21 in your presentation?
One moment, I will try to bring that back up.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yes.
No, the other one.
Which other one?
The Independence.
Oh, I know what you mean. Okay, yeah. This is a postcard design.
Yes, this one. This is the design, is not the regular one?
I mean, was it issued? What's the question?
Yeah, but I never see this stamp or postal card.
No.
But I'm surprised because it's not the Guatemalan name in any part of the stamp or postal card.
That's true. That's true. It was meant to be used for Guatemala, but I don't know why. It only has the name of the organization. Have Guatemala spelled out on it. I'm thinking this was probably meant to be an issue from all the 5 countries.
Yeah.
Maybe they would have added the name of the country somewhere in the design. This design just didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, because the Central American countries designed to print and stamp for the centenary of the independence of all the countries. But each country put the name of the country inside the stamp or the postcard. But this is not the Guatemala name in any place.
That's true. Again, I can only guess, honestly, what the designer was thinking. He may have been thinking to add the name somewhere or to change the banner instead of saying Estados Unidos to actually put each country. I don't know, honestly.
Okay.
This is one of those strange things that it just doesn't come with a complete history.
Okay, Michael, may I have your permission to speak in Spanish with Carlos Rivera for an
Absolutely.
explanation?
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much. Carlos, esto es una, bueno, yo veo una estampilla, pero él pone que es una tarjeta postal. ¿Cuál de las dos es?
Mira, yo no la conocía, pero para mí es un sello postal, pero nunca salió. Entonces,
Es un,
como dijo Michael, posiblemente le iban a cambiar el banner de Estados Unidos de Centroamérica a Guatemala o algo, pero sí no hay mayor información de este.
Okay, gracias, Carlos. Michael, Carlos said he never seen this stamp. And
Other than what I have, I've never seen it before either, except for the ones I have.
Okay. And
go ahead.
No,
I wanted to add just only one thing because I do not know. There is a triangle there. Is this a coat of arms from any period in any of the Central American countries? Because that could give the giveaway of what it belongs to.
Yeah, the 5 volcanoes inside the triangle is the 5 republics of Central America, but only Guatemala and Nicaragua use this type of coat of arms.
Yeah, I've seen it on Nicaragua. Yeah, I think the first set of Nicaragua had it symbol, didn't it?
It has a triangle, right?
Nicaragua #1.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael, for your explanation.
Sure.
One more hand there. Heinz.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Very interesting as the other two before. Can you return to this card, please?
Yeah, hold on.
I want to make a comment.
Okay.
Thank you. The reason I think to think it's from Guatemala is that at the top it reads Correos de Guatemala in panel in center above the DE. And this is, I think, the reason.
Right.
Can you read? It's pencil wrote.
Oh, the handwritten note.
Pencil written.
Let me see if I can. Oh no, that didn't work. I'm just trying to see if there's a way to expand this. I don't.
Yeah, on the lower left there is that magnifier glass.
Let me try this.
That one, yeah.
Okay, now you can see the top panel a little bit better. It says Correos de Guatemala in panel and center.
Yes.
And above the DE. So above the DE and above the DE. Okay, so I think what they intended was to expand this maybe a little bit, this banner, and maybe add Guatemala right above the DE here.
Yes.
Yeah. Good catch, Heinz. Good catch.
In the bottom of the page there, I think it's a name of someone.
Excuse me?
In the bottom of this page,
I'm looking. It says Correos 300,000 commemoratura, and it says it shows looks like what they were. It says centavo to centavo oro over here.
Yes, it was another one who mentioned 2 centavos oro.
Right, and it says lithographed color #1, and I can't read the lower right-hand corner.
It's color, and at the bottom is the sign of someone, and they decide to make a commemorative postcard instead of a stamp.
Yes, maybe that indicates they changed from the original intent of a stamp to make a postcard, commemorative postcard instead.
But it's beautiful, this one.
Yeah, I mean the artwork in this is just wonderful. It's just wonderful.
I think on the bottom right, it mentions number one, NO.1.
Yes, number one, and I think this says green.
Yeah, it looks like green.
Maybe.
Maybe. I mean, I would love to
You
know
have a homework, Michael, to explain this in someday.
someday, Alfredo. Yeah, when you work in this area, whether it's Guatemala, Nicaragua, Honduras, whatever, the essays, sometimes there's no way of telling.
Yeah.
It's frustrating, but it's also exciting because you know that there's essays out there that you have never seen. Heinz?
Thank you. I want to make a comment to the question about the different printers in London. It was common that the different printing companies had agents. Many of them in the other directly in Guatemala or in Chile, for example, and they competed to get the oil. So it was normal that they competed, and one time the contract went to American Banknote, then to Waterloo, then to McDonald's or whatever, Perkins Bacon. So this existed. It was so. In the case of Chile, it exists some letters who prove this. So that was my comment. And the question, I don't know if I heard correctly when you mentioned about Waterloo first printing of 18. I think you said that these proofs with the ST have been applied on envelopes, and I don't know if that is the case. I don't know any envelope with this.
Oh, let me clarify. Let me clarify something. When I said envelopes, I didn't mean envelopes that were mailed. I meant for storage in a file cabinet. They would label the outside of the envelope with a copy of the stamp and an ST number for storage, not for mailing.
Like a container.
Yes, I know.
Container.
I know that that's not for mailing. It was for a sample, to show this sample. But I know cards, not envelopes. Cards with the name and with affixed proofs with ST.
Like the one for American Bank.
Okay.
No.
Well, I know I'm quoting from our G2 book. That's where I learned about it, where they described it. But maybe there's other information. I've seen the cards.
I have a card from a complete card, and I have many parts of cards. Some of them with the same number.
Well, except the material, the envelope or card, the stock, looks like thin envelope stock. It doesn't look like card stock on these.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen proofs, play proofs mounted to card stock, but these it feel like envelope material, thin envelope paper.
No, I know thick cards with the affixed copies with different colors and so.
Okay, I can't react further.
In the case of fiscal stamps from Chile. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Any other question or comment out there?
Everybody's waiting.
Okay. I don't see anyone else. And Michael has a visitor right there, so probably an important item.
It's okay. It's okay. So my wife coming in. The family is waiting upstairs for me. So I know we'll be done in a few minutes.
Yeah, we'll be done in a few minutes. So
that was my lovely wife.
Nice to meet her. Well, with that said, Michael, thank you for part 3. This is very informative for us. We can make a parallel with what happened in all the other countries, which is always good.
Very
it's a good
interesting
perspective.
Yes, thank you all so much for inviting me. I love these sessions, getting to meet you all. It's a tremendous treat for me. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, y el día de mañana.